Welcome to the Prepped and Polished podcast, the podcast that empowers you to take control of your education, featuring weekly interviews with influencers in the world of education, as well as tutoring tips, lessons, and updates. And now, here's your host, Alexis Avila.
And welcome back to the Prepped and Polished podcast. This is episode number 144 with returning guest Elizbeth Dankoski, Alexis Avila, your host. And be sure to join our Prepped and Polished community. You can find us on SoundCloud, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Just type Prepped and Polished and you'll find us. Also go to preppedandpolished.com for more info, tutoring and test prep needs. You can contact us there and also sign up for our free ACT essay course right on the front page of our site. Have a question or reaction during or after this podcast? You can email us at radio@preppedandpolished.com. Let's get to today's guest, episode number 144 with Elizbeth Dankoski of the Dream School Project. Here's a brief bio. For the past 15 years, Elizbeth has worked as a private college consultant, helping students get into incredible schools: Harvard, MIT, Columbia, Yale, Caltech, Dartmouth, and many, many others. She went to Wellesley College, which is right down the street from the Prepped and Polished headquarters. On today's podcast, Elizbeth will share some of the biggest myths parents and students need to know about the college admissions process so you don't waste a lot of time doing what you think you should be doing, and teaches us ways to make ourselves more interesting and attractive to college admissions officers. So let's get right to our guest. This is episode number 144 with Dream School Project's Elizbeth Dankoski. Elizabeth, thanks for coming back on the Prepped and Polished podcast. How are you today?
I'm great. So good to be here again.
Okay, so remind our audiences on how you became a nationally recognized college consultant and founder of the Dream School Project.
Sure. Well, it starts back when I was in college. I was, one of the top writing tutors there. And the first family that I ever tutored outside of that called and was looking for a tutor for their 8-year-old son who was doing high school level math at that point. And they wanted somebody to come in and kind of balance out this extraordinary math level with, some of the going deeper with the humanities and the writing and the reading and all of that. And it was just fun. I had never done anything like this. So we just played and we had a great time and we formed a really great bond. And he actually went on to go to college, I think at like 15 or something. But that was my first experience. And then I did such a great job with that little kid that they just told other families, their neighbors, their friends. And then by the time I was done with Wellesley, I had a full roster of students and all word of mouth. And I went on to get, after Wellesley, I went on to get my master's in creative nonfiction. And so I started doing college application essays, which was just a very natural extension for me. And I was getting amazing results with my kids. 75% of them were getting accepted into the top 20 schools, 100% getting accepted into the top 40. And I was like, well, I'm doing something right? And this was with kids who were coming to me as seniors, basically, saying I got to write my essays. But one of the things that happened was that I was seeing these amazing results, and I was also seeing the enormous levels of stress that these kids were dealing with. I mean, they would just come to me and they were just shaking and they couldn't, meet my gaze. And one girl would just disappear. She was applying 18 different schools and she would just disappear for weeks at a time and I wouldn't know where she was. And I would wake up every morning just sick, just worried that she had killed herself. That's how bad her stress was. And that was such a turning point for me, that experience of seeing the kids' levels of stress. And then also the other thing that was happening is that, of course, everyone was getting into one of the really good schools. But not everybody was getting into their top choice schools. They wanted to go to Harvard or Stanford or Yale or Columbia, or even some of the less, competitive schools like UPenn or Cornell. And they would get into a really good school, but not necessarily their top choice school. And I was looking at so the kids who did get into their top choice schools, what was the difference? Because they all had the same grades, the same test scores, the same extracurricular. So what was the difference? And they all had good essays, right? And I realized, it was baffling to me for a little bit because we were all following what we had thought we were all supposed to do, right? And I was encouraging these kids, get your test scores up, do all these awards, blah, blah, blah. And then I realized the kids who were getting in all had something different from everybody else. So for example, one student who got in to MIT early decision that particular year that I'm thinking of, this is about 5 years ago, she had grown up in China, had come over here, I think in 9th grade, and had created a Best Buddies chapter in Beijing, where she grew up. And now, Best Buddies, for those who don't know, is a program that pairs special needs kids with high school students and really integrates them into the rest of society. And she was very moved by this because in China, special needs kids are kind of pushed away and it's kind of shameful. And we really need this. And so she did all the legwork for it. She did the translating. And the woman, when she really first approached her about it, she was like, yeah, whatever. She didn't think she was serious. And she's like, no, we really need this. And she did all of it. And then she wrote, of course, some of her essays about that. And I really think that was the tipping point for her application, because everything else is pretty much the same as everybody else that I was working with. And there were other kids who had other stories like that, where they all had something that was different from what every other high achieving kid was doing. And I thought, okay, we need to teach kids as a whole, like on a bigger level, that there's a different way to do this, one that doesn't have to involve so much stress, can actually be fun and more effective, actually and so I started doing it. I started doing this coaching piece where we look at, what's your project? What are you creating? That's what the Dream School project is about. It evolved into this 9-10 month long mentoring program where the heart of it is, what project are you creating that showcases your unique interests and is something you love to do, totally lights you up, and makes a difference in some way to people around you, whether it's your family or your school or some online community, just makes a difference so that kids have the chance to see, I really have the power to make a difference. Because I think that school doesn't really give kids that opportunity. They're sitting at their desks, they're studying, they're spitting it back, they get a grade, and then they're on to the next thing. But they don't ever really get to see, in a typical public school, what that impact of what they're learning is outside of the classroom. And this is a big piece of what I think is missing from our education system, and what's missing from when they go and try to apply to their top choice schools. They don't have something that really is lighting them up truly. I mean, they might love their sports or, debate team or math team, whatever, but it's not like they're taking it to the level of what they envision. They're just plugging into what other people are doing. And so that's what the Dream School project came out of, was this seeing, wow, we really need a different way to prepare kids, not just for college, but for life. And so that's what I'm doing.
Wow, that's amazing. What vision. So now I'm a parent. I go to dreamschoolproject.com. And what types of services do you provide? What can I get there?
Sure. Well, primarily right now I focus on the Dream School Project, which is this 9-month mentoring program. I have another round that starts in October. And so that's kind of you'll see that's the main focus. I do partner with someone who's extraordinary in the college applications, and he does the college application piece. So if we have seniors listening and they need help with their applications, I have someone amazing that I partner with. I also do some just a select few students of one-on-one work, but I keep that pretty small so that I can focus on the Dream School project and really spreading this vision. We already have kids around the world in this program. We have kids in Bahrain and Romania, and one of the mentors is in South Africa, and we're working on bringing this program to the townships there, kids all over the U.S. So it's really amazing to see that already, in this early stage of growing this program, how much interest there is.
That's amazing. Now, what is the time commitment? It's 9 months, but how many hours a week do you spend together?
It's an hour and a half a week online in a setting like this, where the kids get to see, get online in groups of 10 at the most, 10 students with their mentors, face-to-face through video, just talking about, the new content for the week. How's it going? What's your projects? Who do you need to connect with outside of this program? How do you formulate those emails? basically what resources do you need to move you forward. And then we also do some, sort of mini lessons after the first core 5 or 6 weeks of the program. We move more into the one-on-one support, still in the group setting. But more from the perspective of what are the mini lessons, like how do we do goal setting, and how do you find a mentor who's a specialty and has a specialty in your field, or how do you create a mission statement so that when you go to try to manage the social media component of distraction, you know your mission, so that you're not just like trying to be disciplined and get stuff done, but it's more your why is so much clearer. So kind of doing a lot of work like that. It's basically the way I think about the Dream School project, is that it's teaching you everything that you don't learn in school. Right. So resourcefulness, very high levels of creativity, more things like, the goal setting piece, but also the importance of gratitude and contribution and understanding your personality type. So all these ways of kind of being in the world that so many of us develop way later. Like, this is stuff that I didn't even discover till I was in my late 30s or early 40s now. And this is stuff that I'm passing now on to my students for them to start thinking about in their teens. And it's really amazing.
This is amazing. Yeah, I just think this is extraordinary. I wish I had this when I was a kid. So this is great. Me too. What are some of the biggest myths about the college admission process that parents and students need to know?
Yeah, well, this is a great question. I mean, I think one of the biggest things is thinking that grades and test scores are going to be the way that you distinguish yourself, right? So many kids are just thinking that, you've got to get the perfect grades, the perfect test scores, take the perfect number of AP courses and subject to, SAT 2s and on and on. And the truth is that just gets you in the door. Right? It doesn't distinguish you from everybody else. And there's a really wonderful book called How to Be a High School Superstar by Cal Newport, where he makes this case that, first and foremost, be interesting. You don't need perfect grades to get into your top choice school. Now, this was written a few years ago, so maybe like 5 years ago or something. So and the admissions process is getting more and more competitive. So I'm not saying that grades and test scores don't matter, but I'm saying if you only have perfect grades and test scores, number one, you have no time to do anything else that really lights you up. You're just studying, you're just doing what you have to do, right? But if you focus first and foremost on being interesting and contributing, right, really making a difference and doing it from a place of what lights you up, not to check off a box, not to do it because your school says to or because you think you should, but because you want to, then you write an essay that reflects that kind of passion, you are heads and shoulders above every other applicant, because most people applying to these top tier schools are so stressed and so busy doing the right things that they've lost sight of what they want to do, and they don't even know how to talk about what they want to do. So the big myth is when you rely on grades and test scores as the way to distinguish yourself, it backfires, and you end up often just with these rejection letters or usually waitlist letters, which is really just a school's way of saying most of the time, I'm sorry, you're too good a student to reject, but you don't have enough for me to choose you. That's typically what happens with waitlist status.
That's huge. Every parent should know that myth. Now, how should students allocate their time junior and senior year? Like, how much time should be dedicated to test prep per se, or grades, extracurriculars?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's no one right answer for this. For each student, it's going to be different. But here's what I always say. I was just working with a student on this morning. He's in China, and he was saying, my teacher says I should take statistics, even though I've already gotten a 5 on the AP stats test. He thinks I should do it again and go into more depth. And why do I need to do this? And it was this. We probably talked for 40 minutes about this issue. And what I wanted to say, and I did say, was, listen, this is the tiniest piece of your application, what you got on your SAT 2 or your subject test or your AP, whatever. It's tiny. What's more important is that you take any extra time that you have and pour it into what you love to do and make a difference in some way, and then write an amazing essay about it. That's really, so when I'm looking at kids' time, because I know my kids are so busy. They have so much going on between sports and clubs and academics and everything else they've got. there's not a lot of time left. So you want to use that time very judiciously, and you don't want to be killing yourself for perfect grades and test scores. I have a rule of thumb that, if you take a test, a practice test, an SAT or ACT test a couple of times, and your scores are pretty similar, you're done. Stop. It's the end. It doesn't matter if it's not perfect. Spend your time doing things you love to do and that really will distinguish you, instead of trying to get that extra 20 or 50 points, for the SAT. Because those 20 or 50 points isn't going to make the difference. It's you being interesting and doing what you love and showing yourself as a leader. That's what makes the difference. So that's a
huge tip, because you got to know when to cut off. When to just say, look, I need to spend some time on what's really important for my soul in the future. And, if you're getting similar SAT scores, what's 10 points in the grand?
Yeah, exactly. It. Yeah.
Now, so do you find that most college essays collectively are poorly written? Which college essays are the good ones? Which ones are the ones that are, even an Ivy Leaguer will be intrigued? Admission officer.
Yeah, I think what students don't typically do this. They don't do this kind of writing. They don't have the experience. Maybe they do it, at the beginning of, each school year. The English teacher might say, okay, write a personal essay about your summer or something personal. But as a whole, kids are not taught this kind of writing, so they really do not know how to do it. They're very embarrassed to talk about themselves. They feel like they shouldn't brag. And they think that they should write in a very poetic way, right? That it's the beauty of the language that matters. And I can tell you, the beauty of the language does not matter. What matters is the beauty of your idea. I can give you a good example of this. I had a student a few years ago, this is 2 years ago, come to me, and he had gotten deferred at Cornell School of Engineering, which is his top choice school, of course. And he came to me and he said, is there anything I can do for my regular decision round? Now, granted, this is like, December 18th or something, and he's got to get all his applications ready for January 1st. And I took a look at his essay. It was beautifully written. He was a beautiful writer. For an engineering student especially, he was a beautiful writer. But I already knew that his essay was about how he had volunteered at the farmer's market and created an app for his position there. And I already knew he was into robotics. I already knew that he volunteered at the farmer's market. So this essay was basically a beautifully written resume, essentially.
Okay.
And so I said to him, hey, you know what? If you want to stand out, you have to tell a much more personal story, because this isn't telling me anything new from what I can already glean from your application. So we talked together for 45 minutes. It was really short, and this beautiful story came out about when he entered high school. He joined the debate team, and he was really shy and kind of awkward, and he wasn't a debate kid at all. But he didn't want to quit because he had a good work ethic, so he hung in there. But he always felt out of sorts and uncomfortable. And the next year when he came back, he thought, maybe I'll try out the robotics team. And it was an instant fit. He loved it. Even though they were getting ready for these competitions, that everyone had time for him. They'd be like, hey, here's a screwdriver. You want to try this out? And it was very friendly, and he never forgot that. So he went on to eventually become captain of the robotics team. But that wasn't the story. The story was that he was always the guy turning around to the kids behind him who were kind of on the edges and saying, hey, do you know what's going on? What do you think about this? And I said, oh my God, you have to tell that story. You're applying to Cornell School of Engineering. Do you know what the stereotype is of an engineer? They're not noticing anyone around them. So tell that story of how you are the one who's always aware of the people around you. I had him write that new story and send it in the form of a letter to Cornell, and then he submitted it to his other regular decision applications. And when the results came out that spring, he got into Cornell and he got into MIT.
All right.
And, that is a perfect example of telling the right story. So the right story, the best story, is a story that shows how you've grown and evolved and become who you are today, so they can really see you for what you uniquely contribute to their campus. And you want to have that sense of arc. I was like this, say at the end of middle school, that's what I always say to my students. Think about how you were at the end of middle school. And now think about who you are today. What's changed? How have you grown? What new awareness do you have? And it doesn't have to be some earth-shattering story. It's not like he went out and, did this huge research project or something.
Right.
It was literally just a tweak in the way that he presented himself. And you can see it made such a difference.
That's amazing. Wow. And great find on just picking apart that stereotype and trying to separate yourself a little bit from the pack. Amazing.
Yeah.
So if you want to make yourself more interesting, what are a few ways to get started?
Oh, I love this question. So I think that what I would say is you start first and foremost by saying, like, what lights me up? And some kids, I've said this to, what do you love to do? And they're like, I don't even like video games. I don't like anything, and I get it, because school doesn't typically teach kids to ever ask themselves, what do I want to do? So they're not used to thinking about this. But then I'll say, well, what are you curious about? Or what kind of makes you sit up in your seat a little bit more? And I was just asking a student this last week. He's one of those kids who's like, I don't like anything. I've tried everything. Nothing's interesting to me. Only thing I want to do is play video games. And I said, you know what? It's okay. It's not your fault. I said, but let's figure out what it is about these video games that's pulling you, right? Is it the storytelling? Is it the immersive experience? So we started looking at virtual reality, because there's some really interesting stuff going on with virtual reality. And then we looked at that for a little bit, and then he's like, kind of like at the corner of his mouth, he's like, well, I kind of like cooking. Like, what? Okay, tell me about that. He's like, well, I started to try to learn to make some eggs. I'm like, all right, this week your assignment is to go look up a recipe that you want to make and play around with it, just have fun.
Absolutely.
And he was like, oh, like he didn't think that was legitimate, right? But how do chefs become, fall in love with what they do? It's you pay attention to the little sparks, right? So I'm always saying to my students, what are the little things? And I don't care what anybody says about whether it's the kosher or the correct thing. Like, if you say you love video games, that's the only thing you care about, I don't care. Tell me that you want to maybe code your own game, or create your own, or create an app, or figure out the storytelling, or figure out the music. That's, I don't care where you begin somewhere. The other thing is also to think about, in the combination of what sparks you in some way, even if it's kind of mild, is also to think about, what problems around me do I notice and do I feel that I could address or solve in some way?
Okay.
Because, right, I mean, there's going to be issues around us, and we're in this new amazing digital era, right, where there are new issues that our parents never had to deal with, right, or their parents never had to deal with, and so there's new opportunities, and there's new issues, and there's new ways of doing things. I mean, last year, the highest paid YouTube celebrity made $12 million filming himself playing video games and running commentary as he played. And now, I'm not saying that every kid wants to do that, or parents want their kids to do that, but the point is, we're in a whole new era where if you think of something and you want to create it, you can do it. Because we all have, everyone that I work with has access to computers and the internet, and you can create whatever you want. So I always just say, like, so what are the problems around you? What do you notice? What pulls you in some way? Because we make these kids do all this volunteering, and the kids just show up and they're so blasé and they don't really get anything out of it. It's just something to check off and do because they're forced to. But how about saying, what matters to you? What kind of problems do you want to solve? What kind of difference do you want to make? What kind of impact do you want to make? And a lot of times kids will have no idea because they've never been asked these questions before, certainly not in school. And so I just start by saying, what are you curious about? And then what's something that you could solve? And it can be a mini project, right? Like, I've been doing this in my program with my kids right now. Over the summer, a lot of kids were traveling. They couldn't work on, they couldn't do anything substantial with their projects. But I said, how about a mini project? So, for example, one girl, I said, what could you do today to make someone's life better in some way? She was traveling. She was in a hotel. She's like, well, maybe I could leave a note for the maid and thank her. And I'm like, well, why don't you handwrite it and go hand it to her, right? And really connect, right? Even if she doesn't speak the same language, smile at her and just say thank you, in a way that she understands. And she was like, oh, and so I guess that's because this is one of the biggest things that I think is missing from our education system, is this allowing students to see that they have the power to make an impact on somebody's life. And when you start to see that you can do this in small ways, it gives you this hope of like, oh, so if I can just simply make somebody's day better by smiling at them or leaving a note or saying thank you to my teacher or something small, it gives you that feeling of like, oh, I can do more than that. Right? And this is like a core human need, that need to feel that you are contributing, that you matter, that you're making a difference. This is a core human need. And that's a big piece of what I'm talking about in my program, is how do we help you feel that you matter with your particular gift?
It's incredible that you're doing that, and you definitely hit on a really big issue in society. But the way to get out of that is just giving and service to others and sparking that in them early.
Comes in, because when you see that somebody else lights up because of something you do, that lights you up, right? It's impossible not to be moved by that.
Absolutely. And it doesn't matter where you come from. We all share that same inner need. That's amazing. So what types of projects are you currently working on now? And please, share with us things that,
some of the
to look out for.
What am I doing, or what? Well, so my big vision is to take this program to every public school in the nation. Right now, we're starting with the private sector because, when you're starting something, you just figure out who is most likely to be drawn to something like this, and you can build your platform, take some of the revenue, and start putting the pilot programs into the public schools. I'm currently talking with someone who's connected to the KIPP schools. There's, I think, 400 schools. They're charter schools around the nation, and they typically tend to serve low-income kids. So this is a really exciting opportunity for me to move from working solely with kids who have resources, who can pay for my programs, and start to bring my material to kids who wouldn't otherwise be able to access it. So this is really exciting for me. Also, the Today Show just reached out and said they were interested in having me on. So, there's a lot of momentum and energy behind what I'm doing here. And my vision this year is to reach 500 kids. And then from there to just keep expanding out, and my heart is about getting this message in front of kids that every one of them has something extraordinary to bring to the world. And it's really just a matter of asking the right questions. What do you love? What lights you up? What kind of difference do you want to make? And then giving the platform to actually answer those questions. Because I did this last year in a 5-week program, and it was amazing. One girl went through my program, and she had a 50% chance of graduating high school. And after she went through this 5 weeks, she decided to create her own nonprofit. And this fall, she has an appointment to meet with Sandra Day O'Connor, and one of the Supreme Court justices, to take her nonprofit to the next level. And I thought, that's extraordinary that she was able to get that out of 5 weeks. But that's not typical, right? That's not every student is going to be able to just run with their ideas like that. And so that's why I've created this longer, 9-10 month program to really be able to say, let's build your ideas piece by piece by piece. So
wow, that turnaround, from 50% graduation, to, that nonprofit, it's a testament to,
Her father told me he's now at peace about his daughter's future. And he said this to me after the 5 weeks. And I was so humbled and so just amazed that this is the power. This is what I find is that it doesn't take a lot different, something much different from what we're doing in our schools. It's not like we have to totally redo everything. It's just we have to pivot in a very specific way to asking these different kinds of questions that just the schools aren't able to ask right now because of the focus on the testing. So it's great. It's a perfect time to actually kind of redirect the conversation with the college applications mania going on. Right.
Man, I'm so inspired by your program. I almost want to put on a cap and pretend I'm a high school student and join. But
Yeah.
so teenage years. To the teens listening to us today, any words of wisdom?
Well, I mean, my main thing is always, you have something amazing to offer the world. You may not know what it is. You might feel like you're just grayed out, or you just, you're kind of plugged into what so many other students are doing. But every single student, every single one of us has something amazing to bring to the world. And when we start asking ourselves new questions and tapping into this deeper level of creativity that we're just typically not able to access through our schooling, really amazing things are able to come through us. And that's what I would say. And I think there's sort of different types of experiences as a teen. Some are in the Ivy League route and really feeling a lot of pressure and, pushed into that and feeling like I have to do it this one way and I got to get perfect grades. And I always say to them, focus first and foremost on what you want, so that you don't teach yourself that success is suffering, right? Because I think a lot of times kids think, oh, if I just get the perfect grades and I just kill myself to do this thing, not literally, of course, but I just work so hard, to do this thing, then I'll be successful. But then they've taught themselves that that's the road to success, is a lot of pain, a lot of overwork, a lot of stress, a lot of overwhelm. So there's those kids, and I would say to them, just focus on what lights you up, the thing that just you want to get out of bed in the morning for, and make your life, set your life up so that it revolves around that. And then to the kids who are not trying to go to the Ivy Leagues, they're just, the kids who are just trying to make it through and they feel kind of grayed out and maybe like disconnected.
Right.
I say the same thing to them, like, you have something amazing. You don't feel that you have anything. You feel like you don't fit in, or you don't really matter, and you're not really contributing. You're not the cool kid or whatever, but you have something amazing. Your unique experience makes you you, and only you can bring to the world what you have based on your experiences. And so instead of just kind of, just like showing up to school and just doing what you're supposed to do, start questioning. Start saying, do I care about this? Does this matter to me? What do I care about? What is the thing that really gets me out of bed in the morning? And don't let anyone tell you what the right answer is to that, because it's going to be different for every person. If it's video games, I don't care, but only you are going to know if that's fulfilling to you. The student I was working with last week, where I said, do you feel fulfilled? How do you feel? And he was like, no, I don't. And I said, and he's the kid who just wants to play video games. He said, I just don't know what else to do. And I said, we're going to fix that. So that's the other thing I would say to students is, you can't do this by yourself. And most kids can't do it with their parents. So find a mentor. There's a really great article that I have on the HuffPost about how to find a mentor. Maybe we can link to it with this podcast, and so students can find that. How do you actually go find a mentor? And I have a video on it too. And because this is something that's just not taught in school, and you need to partner with someone. I mean, I'm sure you have a mentor. I certainly have several mentors. I mean, you don't go through life and hope that you're going to achieve, world-class success without partnering with the people who are going to support you in getting there, who've already done it themselves. So those are the three things. Ask yourself what lights you up. Ask yourself what kind of difference you're going to make. Find a mentor, and know that you have something extraordinary to bring to the world.
Wow, it's amazing. So uplifting. Just an honor to have you as my guest again. So thanks again for coming on the Prepped and Polished podcast, and have a great day.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Alexis.
Awesome. And this wraps up our show with Elizabeth Dankoski of the Dream School Project. It was episode number 144. To connect with Elizabeth and sign up for her amazing mentorship program, go to dreamschoolproject.com. I hope you enjoyed episode 144 with Elizabeth Dankoski. To listen to my last conversation with Elizabeth, check out episode 94 on how a perfect SAT score can backfire on you. And tune in soon to hear our next podcast episode. It will be number 145. It will be a tutoring tips episode. To access today's episode 144 and all of our podcast episodes, you can do it in two ways. One, go to preppedandpolished.com/podcast, or go to soundcloud.com/preppedandpolished. Thank you for joining us on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Now go out there and take control of your education.
You've been listening to the Prepped and Polished podcast. For more information, check out preppedandpolished.com. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.